we got to talk about Black Adam because, you know,
Yes, we do.
that was this week's big movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more than just this week's big movie. This is a movie that's been on my what do you call it, my radar for quite some time, and honestly, going into the movie, I'm sure you saw like some of the reactions from critics and the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it was coming in pretty low. I think it was sitting in the 40s or 50s when I went to see the
Rotten
film.
Tomatoes did not like this thing at all. Yeah.
Yeah, the critics at least. And then I saw
Critics.
that when the audience scores were put up, like with the first thousand or so reviews, it debuted like in the high 80s, like 88 or 89. I don't know where it's sitting right now. I can try to pull it up, but
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I went into this movie and in one sentence, it was a lot more fun than I thought it would be based on the reviews and the word of mouth I was getting, at least from, the
Yeah.
internet. So,
I swear, like, it's like Marvel has a deal with Rotten Tomatoes or something because
I was just
they
gonna
do,
say,
they do,
Warner
hmm,
Brothers actually owns Rotten Tomatoes, the site.
really
Yes, they're the ultimate parent
fascinating.
company of Rotten Tomatoes. So that is a
That's so
misconception
weird.
sometimes for people, which is it is like sort of a conflict of interest onto its own. But yes, Warner Brothers is ultimately the owner of Rotten Tomatoes.
And yet it didn't influence this. That's
Well,
that's
because
actually good to know.
yeah, I mean the critics, the Rotten Tomatoes certified critics. I guess that's what they thought about the movie. And we can dive into it. I'm not gonna say this was a flawless film. I mean, but
It
before I
wasn't.
do that, you tell what were your overall impressions of the movie?
So honestly, like as I've said before, I've never really been a Marvel fan. I like the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, um, and Marvel movies have really annoyed me lately because they've become homogenous and also like it's like eating a bag of Skittles for a giant bag of Skittles. It all just blends together and tastes like nothing at the end of the day. A lot of sugar, a lot of candy, but it doesn't taste like anything. So I was I was not prepared to like this movie. I'm not a big rock fan, um, and I didn't know the character particularly well. Um, and they've been saying we don't want to compete with Marvel. We don't want to out Marvel Marvel. And for the most part, I gotta say, they did their own thing here. And I actually really liked The Rock's portrayal of Black Adam. He wasn't trying to be cute. And anytime he leaned into doing a little bit of the self aware humor, I thought that was kind of wrong. Every little joke, Adam Smasher, I think annoyed me the most out of all the characters
I
because
liked the guy.
I didn't like him. I just thought
I had
like,
the
you know what?
opposite
Let's
reaction to both of those things, for the
really.
record. Yeah.
I was so. This movie really does show the contrast of what DC could be to Marvel because we didn't have the bright picture, the bright colors. Not everything was shot on a green screen. It wasn't just like overwhelming your senses
A lot of
with
it was
color
shot. I
and
could tell a lot of the movie it was shot on green screen, especially a lot of the
but it
exterior
wasn't
stuff.
it
Yeah.
wasn't crazy CG of like
Yeah.
the latest Thor movie, which was like
Which I
all
think
on
the
green
problem
screens.
with because the CG in this movie, there's a lot of green screen works. Obviously, there's a lot of CG, but I think the way they graded, the color graded everything,
That's
and
what I'm
it's sort
talking
of
about.
it had this uniformity where I think the candy effect that you're talking about, like in Thor, it just felt like you're looking at some combination of a rainbow of colors in like
It
every
looked
like
like
the
a bunch
latest
of
Thor.
internet pop-up ads to me.
Yeah.
That's what Marvel has become. It's hey, this celebrity and this bright color and this sound and this other thing. And it's just like, tell me the story. And I actually really like there's a great twist when you learn about Black Adam's origin. And I suddenly cared about him. And the fact that Dr. Fate uses his abilities and they set it up beautifully early on. It wasn't one of these, let's set it up and now I'm going to deliver on it. Like the fact that he's like, I can separate my mind and my body. He explains that. And he is able to communicate with Black Adam to bring him out of captivity. It was a great move. There was heart. There was family. I will say that there was a lot of good family stuff in this, and I honestly, I was pleased with this every time it leaned away from mimicking Marvel. I liked I liked Doctor Fate until he started getting cute about the sarcasm. All that sarcasm stuff seems straight out of Guardians of the Galaxy to me. It's like I don't need that. But I I think if they lean into keeping it grounded, not trying to distract you with bright colors and cameos and all that stuff, and they don't try to be cute with it, we don't need this to be a joke a minute. I'm honestly annoyed by those things, and this didn't do that.
Hey, before we move on, since you said the word, I'm obliged
I know,
to pay
I
my,
know,
we have to pay our respects to Dom
I
Toretto.
know.
Your brother never told you never threaten a man's family?
It is kind of ironic how there's Vin Diesel and The Rock, if you know the feud between the two. Yeah, anyway, there's some irony behind the sequence of events there. Um, anyway, so I'll say this. I liked a lot because to me, this movie did humor well. Because whereas I think Bathos in Marvel movies of late has become very one note and oftentimes misplaced and mistimed, this
Yeah,
movie had, those lighter moments of like comic relief or just
I
there
will
was some
say that.
like
Yeah,
the best example of this, or not the best, but maybe one of the examples of this would be because I think the best example is not actually, yeah, the best example is not this, but one of the funnier things was um w- Black Adam trying to learn what sarcasm is, and Dr. Fate and the interaction where it was a little cringy at times the way they kind of went about it. I think that could have been executed better. The exchange of dialogue. But the catchphrase thing, and like the kid even mentions, I forget the
I
name of
didn't
the
like
kid,
any of
Amun
that
or something.
stuff.
He
I didn't
said
like
like,
any of that stuff.
do you remember like he said at one point when he's chasing him down the stairs, and he's like, dude, you gotta have a catchphrase like the superhero industrial complex can do wonders for you, and that
Yeah.
term just got like randomly dropped and forgotten about, and I'm like,
No, I mean
what?
honestly, the
Um,
kid pissed me off.
a lot
In
of
some
people didn't
scenes,
like the kid, and
I didn't like him at all.
I don't know how much of it had to do with the writing and how much was the acting. I do think they
There's a
could have
little
done
of
a better
both.
job with
Little of
that, or
both.
maybe gone in a different direction. But it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I mean, the villain, by the
No,
way, at the
here's the
end of the
thing.
movie wasn't the greatest thing ever
I
either. But
I liked what
um,
the kid stood for in terms of Black Adam's story. I thought there's a little bit of a redemption arc in there, and he gets to sort of recreate his lost family, and it's a good character to have in there. I just thought like I don't know. If you're a kid watching this and you see that kid, you go, "Oh, he's got a real enthusiasm for superheroes. Maybe I'll develop an enthusiasm." I see why they did that. Fine.
yeah.
When
Which,
he's, I
speaking of
don't,
which,
I'm kind of done with
yeah,
the I'm a kid, but I'm smarter than all the adults thing. Like that's, whatever. But
that
you
yeah, the
can't win them
kid.
all.
I will say that the worst thing about the kid that really annoyed me at times was the thing that he yeah, like you said, he wanted to be like the smartest person in the room, and sometimes the kid was doing stupid things where you were like, it almost felt contrived to get him into trouble so that the movie
Yeah.
had a place to go next. And so it felt a little forced sometimes. And yeah, to that end, I will agree. However, the other point that you just made, I think is also a very interesting one. So this movie is opening, wow, actually, I just looked at the Sunday AM update and it's outperforming its projections. But
Look at that.
I'll start with the international one because I noticed on the Saturday morning update for this movie for Black Adam, I'll point out something very specific here. Let me pull it up. So here it is. This movie, they say this, it's a very short line in the article. Anecdotally, we're hearing the family play is stronger than expected. And this is globally for this film. And I think
I
it
buy
has
it
something to do with the kid being in the movie because he's really like the entry point for a lot of other kids watching the film because
for sure.
it's no really none of the other characters other than maybe the Amer, the brother of Adriana, who I love. Mo Amer, the comedian. If you haven't seen this guy do some stand-up comedy, watch him. He's hilarious. I relate to him more so because I too am like an immigrant, like I'm a naturalized citizen in the U.S. So I went through that. I mean, he had to wait years to get his citizenship, so I had a much easier time with that. But I know what it feels like to not be born in the U.S. and kind of have to go through
Sure.
an acclimation period, and a lot of his comedy is based on that. But his character in the movie was a great like where I think like he brought a lot of the comic relief, but he also helped ground the movie in a sense of like he felt like a real person I can run into in real life, whereas I think a lot
He
of the
was
JSA
he
and
was the
Black Adam
electrician.
didn't. Yes, he was the
I
he
love
gets
that
shot in the
character.
abdomen. Yeah.
Now, so here's the thing. He was brilliant. His comedic timing was great. He wasn't a celebrity being fed lines. And anytime I laughed at what he said, I did. I was like, that's well placed in someone who's not trying to save the day.
Yeah.
I really liked that it wasn't a superhero making the jokes.
Yes. Well, the Rock tries. Speaking of
I
it
know.
was kind of the whole catchphrase thing that they finally pay off at the end. I was like, okay, I could have done
Yeah,
without it, but I don't mind the whole tell him the Men in Black sent you. And like, I'm like, okay, all right, I'll give it to you. It's The Rock. I'm a fan of The Rock
well,
as
so
Dwayne
here's the
Johnson,
thing.
so I'll forgive a
Here's
lot
the
of those things.
here's the thing that I liked about that. This character, his entire motivation and his entire is like he wants to avenge his son. He misses his son. He wants to
Yes.
be the hero to his son. And that's the whole fiber of this that's the backbone. That's why he listens to the kid and he protects the kid because that's the first kid that he comes into contact with and he feels this what would you call it? I guess a
I don't know,
paternal
this
instinct.
connection maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wants to right the wrong of his past. And that's why he even agrees to take on the powers in the first place. He wants to protect his son, and then he can't. So when he honors, and this is what made all of those things okay for me, when he says, "Oh, this is what the boy wants me to do. He wants me to have a catchphrase. He wants me to be a hero." And I just think that's the dad in him being like, this doesn't matter so much on the grand scheme of things, but I want to get this right for this kid because I couldn't get it right for my kid. That's
Yes. Which I will
sobering.
say the order in which we find out the whole twist about like his origin, that he wasn't the one given the powers by the wizards, but his son gave it. Which, by the way, I think is a departure from the comic book origin, but it was
Is it?
something that I was like, I noticed like, is that the skinny Rock in the beginning of the movie? Because like his silhouette, I was like, that's skinny Rock. That
Skinny
looks like
Rock was a
him.
really funny, like
But
one of the
like
funnier
at the
parts of
time, at the time, I sort of assumed what they were going for is like the father of the child is gonna look like the child some way, so maybe like he looks like the Rock too. But then later on, we find out that no, that was the Rock's character. That was Teth Adam, and
yeah.
I
Great
I'm
twist.
that was I think for me a welcome departure because it doesn't do anything to fundamentally change who the character of Black Adam is. If anything, it formed the foundation of the internal conflict of the character, which was like you were talking about in the beginning of the movie. He is somebody, or like when he first is woken up from his prison or his tomb,
Yeah.
he's somebody who believes these powers were a curse and he doesn't deserve them, and that he obviously went out and killed a bunch of people looking for revenge, and he has to
Well,
transition
so
from there to an acceptance of like, yes, I can do, not only did fate give me these powers, and fate doesn't, as Dr. Fate says, fate makes no mistakes, or something to
yeah.
that effect. And he also has to realize that vengeance isn't the right thing, and then he had that, so he has to be at peace with himself by the end of the movie before he can finally start to function in the new world that he is waking up in.
You
And to
make a lot of
me,
really good
that
points.
was done well. Although they could have spent more time on that internal conflict, I think that's maybe where some of the critics that are, not looking at this movie so kindly, they're thinking about like, I think this movie focused a lot on the surface level action and plot that kept, it was a torrid pace. Like the movie just kept going, and every other scene was like a fight scene. But I think those critics who were, who were rating this movie really low, I think they wanted to see that internal conflict be externalized a bit more, or be put in front and center a bit more, or be weaved into the overall narrative a little more, because I think it got sidetracked at times until every time we went and back and he's like looking at the statue of his son, and reminiscing. Other than those scenes, you sort of like that internal conflict kind of got sidetracked at times. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. You were gonna.
No, I mean, you make a lot of really good points. Thematically, you know, what they've done with superheroes is they said these people are kind of cursed with their abilities. Every single, I don't know so much about Hawkman, but like everybody's, everybody is given these powers or takes on these powers, um, and that's how fate dies. It's I'm tired of this, and I can get rid of this curse, and it'll be the right thing for everybody. He's been using it to help people, but he gets to a point where it's too much, and it's the only viable option for him, and he feels a sense of relief. But that contrasted to the Tony Starks of the world, which is like, I'm gonna be powerful. I'm gonna have fun being powerful. Everything's kind of a joke. I'm a badass. Nothing can really phase me. I'm a superhero. I'll
Billionaire
survive. I'm
playboy.
great.
He was in the Avengers. He's like, take off the suit and what are you? Billionaire playboy philanthropist. Which it's pretty. Those are three pretty decent things to have in combination. But still, like I see
Sure,
what you mean though. It's
but I guess there's heart in this. Like there's a character and a story that you can actually care about, um, and it's not almost every other hero story. Think about every Disney story. Most Marvel superheroes, like, maybe I'll get reamed for saying most. It's like Spider-Man. His parents are dead, and then he loses his uncle, and eventually loses his aunt,
yeah.
and almost all these characters, they start their journeys because they're orphans, and they have to step up and become a hero.
Yes.
This is not that story. This is
Sort of the reverse of that story.
It is.
It's like Flashpoint.
It
In,
is. It's a lot like Flashpoint. And this is a father trying to not so much avenge his son, but trying to deal with the guilt of having lost his son and feeling responsible and feeling like he should have been more of a protector. But he even walks a fine line between, he has no place in this conflict originally. He just wakes up, and he is morally gray, not because he can't be trusted by either side. It's because he has to learn about what matters. And that's all of that is refreshing and new and different than every other superhero movie, which is, you're the good guy. Don't ask any questions. You're the good guy. There's a bad guy. You have to stop him. Okay, pretty, yep, pretty cut and dry, And this guy he has to figure it out. And he has to learn to trust people and who to trust. But it's, I don't know, it was fun. It was a fun movie. And I liked it a lot more than the last Marvel movie I saw, which was Thor, Love and
no,
Thunder.
here's the thing. This year, the two Marvel movies that have come out in theaters so far, unfortunately, I think they've been rather disappointing, at least for me. Multiverse of Madness was
I didn't like that either.
basically a mess.
Yeah.
Thor: Love and Thunder, I had a hell of a good time with in the moment, but then after the fact, it had a really bad aftertaste because you realize that it's very surface level and doesn't really go anywhere. Because ultimately, all you walk away from the movie with is Thor now has a daughter who actually, has Chris Hemsworth's daughter in real life.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, okay, even if you didn't know that though, I mean, I'm all for the whole father-daughter relationship. I always find, those to be really fun to see on screen, especially when done well.
Yeah.
This movie, by the way, I wanted to just quickly come back to the idea of when they had those humor moments. Like this is something that I had so much fun with. And I know you didn't have it because you mentioned it earlier. Noah Centineo's Atom Smasher and then Quintessa Swindell's Cyclone. The chemistry with them, their interactions was just fun because you had like in the middle of this movie where you have like The Rock playing or Dwayne Johnson playing Black Teth Adam, who's a super serious dude who's got all this like internal conflict and everything, vengeance, and he doesn't deserve this as a curse and not a gift and all that stuff. And you have like these mercenaries just like killing people and have these advanced
Yeah.
Eternium, which is another MacGuffin metal that material that these movies have now. you have these two people who it just felt like you're watching like an entirely different thing going on, and it could have landed badly for some people, and like I think you didn't take well to it, but
Well,
like for me,
I just
I really enjoyed the change of pace. Like, let me like the
that's
best thing
fine.
about it was like from the beginning you saw that awkward energy, and then you just saw like Noah Centineo. I forget the name, like the Adam Smasher. I forget his like character name, but like
Mhm.
he was like clearly like infatuated with this girl. Like they're sitting there talking about how she just like helped heal Moimer's like bullet wound with nanotechnology, and she's like he's just trying to like compliment her because he's trying to hit on her yeah, nanotechnology is really cool. And she's like, "But you're the one who grows like huge with your atoms. I mean, you're saying nanotechnology." She's like, yeah, no, but nanotechnology is really cool. And then later on, like every time he messes up, like Hawkman's like, you and me. Later,
I
like,
know. I see.
and the best look, hold on. The best part of the movie for me was like the scene where they're like trying to figure out what the text in the crown means. Like life is the only way to death, or death is the only way to life, right?
Mhm.
And then and then he makes this comment of they're trying to figure out what is the correct translation. He's like, well, I think it means life is precious, right? So I think we should like try to preserve life. And he's like doing it in like this very like pointed, like trying to make an impression on the Cyclone character. And then
Yeah.
Hawkman just shuts him down. He's like, stop. And I'm like, yeah, that was that could be cringy. I was like, oh, that's funny because it's like that awkward teenage energy
I
going on.
thought that like you can do that. I felt like it made his character kind of flat to just be the bumbling buffoon of the group, and he's there.
Yeah, they never gave him that moment of like he may be a bumbling buffoon, but he can be useful. He sort of ended up being the bumbling buffoon throughout. Like
Yeah,
I
I would have
I
liked.
think bumbling buffoon is a little bit of an exaggeration, but I do see what you mean though. Yeah.
No, I mean almost every scene that he's in, he's running the wrong way, or he crashes onto, or he's like doesn't know how to talk to people, or it's just like I'm as he's a hero, and I'm like, how am I supposed to have faith in this guy as a hero? And maybe if he comes back for other movies, we'll see him mature and become something, more of a strong hero. But
Yeah.
in this, I just found him annoying.
Okay. Well, and what did you think about Henry Winkler being the original Atom Smasher and him getting
I like
like
Henry
that
Winkler.
video call? I was like,
I like
oh,
him.
you know what? I want that Atom Smasher origin story movie now, and I want to. They should de-age Henry Winkler, and I will
No, they
watch
should
that
not.
movie.
No, they should not.
I don't
No,
know.
they
Or
absolutely should not.
dude, I would honestly like Dr. Fate. Give me that like World War One or World War Two movie where Dr. Fate is like this guy's young, and he
I don't
first
need
gets
it.
his powers.
I don't
I
need it.
I would be
I
there for it.
really that was my favorite thing about Dr. Fate. He's in, he's great, he's gone. I don't need the full, backstory. Like it's suggested. And I like to imagine that it's Pierce Brosnan as a young man. I don't want to cast somebody else. I don't want to pull an Obi-Wan on these guys and just drag out a story with a lot of CG. I'm not interested. He served a narrative purpose here, and he carried out his mission beautifully. We're done. We're done.
Sure. I mean, the helmet is gonna eventually choose somebody else, so I guess the character of Dr. Fate will be
Could
around. But it was kind of to me, it was honestly a little bittersweet seeing that they have Pierce Brosnan like finally in one of these roles, and he did a fantastic job. And then his character dies, and again serving a purpose. The one thing this is something we can touch on briefly. Um, that relationship between Hawkman and Dr. Fate, I think, was left a little underdeveloped. They could have used a few extra scenes, maybe flashback once or twice, or maybe give them more of a connection than they're just like old ancient friends. Because then when
I
you see that moment where Dr. Fate decides to sacrifice himself because he's like, this is the way it has to be, and he locks out Hawkman, I personally had a hard time connecting to Hawkman's grief in the moment, because up until that point the only thing they've done is just tell us through dialogue that they're these old acquaintances and these long time friends. And I wish I could have gotten a little more context to feel more of an emotional gravitas behind
well,
Dr. Fate's action in the third
I
act.
personally didn't need that, but I do think this isn't the last of Hawkman that we're gonna see.
No,
You know,
no,
move
I think there's a lot
actually.
more you can do with them. his
There's a lot more
character.
you can do with
There's
all
a
of these
prequel
characters.
comic for this movie with this entirely like an adventure of Hawkman and how he's like sort of like a Tony Stark-esque character in this world, and
Is he?
it's all nanotech based armor, and he had his original armor that was not nanotech in like a glass uh display on the plane at one point. He looks back on it, and everything he does now is nanotech. His character is really cool. Aldous Hodge is a great casting choice for the role too.
I liked
So
him. I liked
yeah.
him. You know, but I think as this moves forward, and we've gotten a lot of indications that this movie is leading to some more development of the DCEU. So we'll probably see more of Hawkman. We may get some more dialogue. We may get those flashbacks. We might learn more about things Dr. Fate did. Who knows? Maybe they've already filmed stuff with Pierce Brosnan that they're going to put into other movies as just like, you know, here's something else that he did. We don't know. We don't know.
Possibly. I mean, if you look at I threw this up earlier in the segment, but again, we're doing this show on a Sunday, and so this is the latest. These are the latest numbers, and worldwide, this right now is tracking for $140 million worldwide debut in the opening weekend. Yesterday and even coming into the weekend, they were looking at closer to like 120, 130, somewhere in that range. So clearly it's overperforming, which is great to see. And not only that, but domestically, the initial projections when it first started tracking was like around 70 to 75 million. And then that number dropped going into this weekend to like 60 to 62. And now it's looking like it's coming in at 67. It's not a huge like jump up from the expected, but it is overperforming like the tracking going into the weekend. And $140 million debut, even if it has a big drop off, as a lot of these movies do because they're front loaded at the box office, I do believe this movie is going to make enough money. It has to make 5 to 600 million to more than break even and give them enough of a profit to justify a sequel, direct sequel. But I guarantee you, even if it's not a direct sequel, there will be a sequel. The Rock didn't sign up for one movie, and the post-credit scene only hints at what's to come, which we will talk about more later. But the point I was trying to make, this movie is off to a great start. And
I'd say
just very
so.
quickly, because I pulled this up earlier, we talked about it briefly, the idea that, the critics really slammed this movie, but you look at the audience score. I mean, the critic score is down to 40% with 214 reviews, but with 2,500 plus audience reviews, it's sitting at a 90%. Clearly people are loving this movie. I don't know how good the word of mouth is and how strong it is, but the 90% has to indicate that there's going to be people going to watch this multiple times, which will help the box office. So I think this is
Yeah,
all good
I,
stuff.
I think the critics really had a touch on this one, and it's nice that people are embracing the themes that they are, and I'm optimistic for DC right now.
Yeah. I mean, this movie wasn't exactly like the Dark Knight level kind of a movie, which kind of leaves you
No,
with a lot of thought-provoking ideas at the end of the movie. But what it does do, I felt like I've noticed people said like it felt like some people have reviewed it as like a 90s action movie where it was
yeah.
there, you're there for the thrill of the ride, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. It didn't necessarily leave you like with a new perspective on life or the world around you after the fact.
Oh, but the thing is, you can find it in this.
Right, there
It's
are
not
things.
absent.
It's not the central focus. I feel like right these days we have gotten used to like superhero movies having that role in our society because superhero movies dominate so much of our movie-going experience that they
Mhm.
now also have to be the kind of movies that make you rethink your perspective on the world as a whole and have that be the
Nothing wrong with a little
centerpiece of the
substance
film.
in anything.
Yeah.
In
But the
anything.
one thing I will say about this movie, I felt like some people, like some of the reviews I've read from the critics at least, I felt like people felt like betrayed. Like those critics were like they were going in for one thing, and they got something entirely different. Whereas I thought this movie was earnestly everything. It never pretended to be something that it wasn't. And from beginning to end, it fully was like, this is an action heavy movie that has got it touches upon some interesting ideas of like you know, does the GSA have jurisdiction in Kondak? What were they doing for the last 27 years that the mercenaries have been, oppressing the people of Kondak? Why are they only showing up to take on black? Like the whole, like, there's some like moral and ethical questions that it asks, but doesn't truly address or doesn't do it cleverly. So I think the writing is lacking a little bit by today's superhero movie standards. However, I still don't think this here's the thing. I made this comparison yesterday walking out of the theater, and I told my brother, I'm like, look, this movie may not have been like an Oscar-worthy screenplay that it was based on. However, The one cardinal sin that it didn't do was it had a bad script, or like a lacking script, but was also boring to watch, which I think was basically Eternals. It was badly scripted, badly edited and shot, and I think a lot of flat compositions and stuff in terms of cinematography, and it was boring to watch.
Yeah.
This movie was a hell of a lot of fun to watch,
Yeah, it was.
and I think that alone, if not, I mean, and your mileage may vary with the writing and the script and all the other stuff, but I think the fact that this was an entertaining watch is all that you really need to know, because if you can sit through this movie and the time just flies by, isn't that like a lot of what we really want from movies, is this like reprieve from the daily life that we, all of our life's problems, just to go and have some fun and kind of, have this little oasis to go to. I think that, to me, is very valuable. And to that end, I very much look forward to watching this movie again very soon.
So the thing is, we're left with some more questions, right, at the end of this movie, because we have that post-credit scene,
Yeah.
which that's
Yes.
another.
Oh man, yeah. I was
That's
smiling
another
year
thing
to
that
year. I was
actually,
just
you know
sitting
what?
there, and like slowly the smile just like I just noticed, oh my God, I'm smiling. Like, by the time that scene ended. Yeah.
I'll be honest here. I am not a big Henry Cavill
Cavill.
Superman fan.
Yeah.
Cavill. I think, you know, I, I tried to give Man of Steel a shot. I wanted it to be something like The Dark Knight. I think it got very close. I would have edited it differently. And
Yeah. We have differing
yeah,
opinions on that, but
I know.
yes.
However, I really, really liked seeing Superman in the post-credit scene. I'm excited for it because I don't know if it was just to see the costume come out of the shadows was
Yes.
I got chills just saying
Yeah.
that just now, and in the theater for sure. But
And I
like,
swear they milked that moment for like 3 seconds longer. I'm like,
I
how
know.
much smoke is he walking through? Get him out here already. I mean, that moment is like, it's one of those things
Yeah.
where your brain just slows down because it's taking it in, so it feels like it's longer than it probably actually was.
Yeah.
But
But like
yeah,
I
I
think
took that
I
in.
think the country, I think the world is ready for Superman.
And
For
he even
just
had the little curl thing, the classic
I know.
Superman curl. Yeah.
I was he
And he's
felt
jacked,
more
as
like
always.
classic Superman than he has in any other movie. So I'll give him another shot. I'm on board. I'm ready for it. Show me Superman. Make us fall in love with Superman again. I am so there. Because I think we could use a, a straight, like, no, not like just a morally 100% good guy. We could use a guy who's not an anti-hero, who's not morally gray, who's not shifting around. He's got a clear, like he's not a flawed man. We know this. He makes
Yeah, and
mistakes, but it's
yeah,
not the story of every anti-hero here. I'm glad
yeah.
to see Superman. I'm excited to
The
see
one thing
him.
that did, like, like, I think in this movie they go out of their way like 5 or 6 times at least, where The Rock is like, I'm not a hero, like that line.
Yeah.
I was like, I get it, like at one point. And then the whole thing about him, I'm like, they waited like 20 minutes or 30 minutes way too long to address the fact that he keeps going through walls. And they're like, we have doors, right? And then he just like, yeah, we had doors in my time. That's how we went into rooms. I'm like, okay, I'm glad we are on the same page. Anyway, but like,
That was
there's
funny.
stuff like
That
that
was
was
funny.
was why this movie was fun. But like the Henry Cavill thing, yeah, look, honestly, here's what it comes down to. If you were to tell me, like, in 1999, when I was like soaking up the greatness of Batman Beyond on VHS tapes and VCDs and whatever, that the superhero genre would take over movies, like the way they have today, and Superman, over the course of the, let's say, from 2008 to 2022, the golden age of superhero movies, that Superman in that entire time would have only one solo movie, I would be like, I'm sorry, what? I understand that maybe Batman has had like half a dozen more, whatever. But Batman is a popular character, or like Spider-Man has had like 5 or 6 appearances, and so on and so forth. But I'm like, Superman has to be in there, and I know he's been in Batman versus Superman and Justice League, both
Yeah.
versions of it,
He
and even
just
made cameos
he's
in
taken a
Shazam.
real back seat.
But yeah, it's about time that the OG superhero that every other superhero since has been somewhat inspired by and based on almost, to take his rightful place at the top of the mountain. And I think
It's going to be a
that's where
tall
they're
order
headed
for
with
whoever
this.
directs it and whoever
Yeah.
writes it, because
And we'll
that's
talk about this later in the show when we talk about like the plans that there was an article out in Hollywood Reporter, and I'll pull it up when we talk about this, where there were apparently it's a lot more than just one cameo that they shot, like I think which was as recent as September that they did this in secret around Labor Day weekend. But Henry Cavill isn't back to just be in one post-credit scene. So I'll leave it at that for now if you haven't read about it already, but we will talk about that in more detail when we get to the state of the DCEU coming up later in the show.
In the meantime, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Be commenting and do all that stuff. Be a good little person on the other side of the screen there. We appreciate everybody who's part of this movie fan community, and we're just fans. So why don't you be part of the conversation? We want this to be a two-way street. Okie dokie. Like and subscribe. Let us know what you think.